In the other video, we were looking at the first group, and the first group were the Pilgrims. And I said that there was two groups that were seeking religious freedom. The next group we're going to look at are the Puritans, who they were and why they were different from the Pilgrims. Yes, they wanted religious freedom, but there was a big difference with them. The Puritans were also from England. And so they were also a part of the Church of England. They wanted to change the Church of England. There were things about the church they saw they didn't agree with. And so they didn't want to leave the church. They really believed in the church. They just wanted to make it better. So in that sense, they were very different than the Pilgrims. They came, but they were the same as the Pilgrims in terms of they came to North America to worship as they pleased. They wanted to change the Church of England and worship that way. They couldn't do that in England, so they wanted to make the changes in America and worship as they pleased. Why were the Puritans so successful? First of all, they came well equipped and well prepared. They sailed in March, and they had great leadership. And so let's discuss each of these one by one. They were well equipped and prepared. They were smart. They really learned from the mistakes of other people trying to establish a colony. And so they really studied that and understood, well, they didn't do this, we need to do this. They didn't have that, we need to bring this. So they were well equipped. They were smart. They sailed in March as opposed to the Pilgrims that sailed in September. And they knew that they would get here in time, after a couple months, to go ahead and plant and grow, have that growing season for the summer, and then to harvest it the fall, and have food already, ready, that they grew to get them through the winter. They also had great leadership. Leadership is, there's some people who really have the big vision. Winthrop had the big vision. They were very driven by what they wanted to accomplish. They had their goals set. They had their objectives and how to meet those goals. And it was, they were just very driven and dedicated, and they were going to succeed. Massachusetts Bay Colony. How did it grow? Well, one of the reasons, remember we talked about the Pilgrims, and they, after about 80 years, only got up to about 7,000 people living there. During the 1630s, that was about 10 years after the Puritans began to establish their colony, Massachusetts colony, there was a huge influx, a great migration. Lots of Puritans came from England. And they came, and these people had skills, and they had abilities, and they knew with all these people coming, there were a lot more resources. They also, again, leadership. Don't ever discount how significant and important leadership is to lead and move and get the people to do what they need to do. They also had many professionals, people that were educated, people that were very thoughtful and thinkers. They had landowners, people who had money, who could invest. There were lawyers and merchants, so they had a lot of professionals there, people who were well trained and skilled, who really knew how to run a business, put things together, and they applied those skills to the colony. Governor John Winthrop, he was the leader of it, and remember, that was all biblically based. This was based on their belief in the Bible. They are Christians, and they really wanted this. It was part of their faith. They wanted this colony to be an example of what a model community would be to the world. In biblical terms, the phrase that they would use from the Bible is they wanted to be the city on a hill, the city that's on top, that is the model that shines the light. So they were very motivated by their faith to be very successful. And one of the things that really promoted their success was some of their beliefs on how you live your life daily. They said you had a duty to honor God. Their faith was very important, a duty to worship God, a duty to live everything out for God. And if you were going to do things for God, that meant you worked hard. You didn't do things half-baked. You didn't, like what happened with Jamestown, go look for gold so you can get rich, as opposed to doing what needs to be done for God. And education. They highly valued education, mainly for the sole purpose, not just to use they saw using their mind and their intellect as honoring God, but that their children could learn to read and read the Bible and continue in the faith. So education was very important. This is what your typical Puritan community, how it would be set up. You had the fence, you had the small homes all in a row, confined within the safety of the fence. They would have some gardens on the inside, many of their fields were around on the outside. You will see that there was like one path and crossing like that, and that the main structure that it led to was the meeting house or the church. And typically everybody who lived within the settlement or the community, they attended the church. It was a very small environment, so you knew everybody, you knew what they were doing, you knew how they lived. So they all belonged to the same church. There wasn't any variety there. In this meeting house, they did the most important, it was the most important building. It was where they worshiped. It was where they made decisions about their community and laws. They did have a vote system, but only males could vote and only males could hold office. And there was a general court named for the lawmaking body. So they called their group that made their laws the general court. The issue is non-Puritans did not have the same rights as Puritans. And understand that as Massachusetts grew, it wasn't just a single group of people. As more and more people came, there were a lot of non-Puritans that came, a lot of people of other faiths that came. And so if they were a part of this community, they did not have the same rights as the Puritans. And they called that the New England way. That's how you were supposed to live life. And here's some other factors. Again, a quick review. The idea of duty towards God and your family and the church. Godliness, that you emulate the qualities, the good things, that you work hard, and that honesty is essential. Education, very important. Everybody was educated. Didn't matter whether you were rich or poor. You were taught at home, so everyone could read the Bible. And another part of their culture that is very different than ours today is they saw that having fun or amusements would lead to being lazy, would lead to the opposite of doing your duty or working hard. And so amusements were very discouraged. So there wasn't a, let down your hair type of situation. It was continually doing your best, doing your work. Some characteristics of the Puritans that was very different from Jamestown and the Pilgrims. They had a low mortality rate. The average life expectancy back then was 70 years of age, which is very high. It was not the norm at all. They had an average of 6 children per family, so you can imagine that these colonies and these settlements grew. After 20 years, you have kids that are 20 years old, 22, and they're moving out and they're getting their own homes. The average age of marriage, women were 22, and so typically they would start having their children right away, and men are 27, and that's when they got married typically, and that is not all that much different than today. Why was there such growth in the Massachusetts colony? There was phenomenal growth as opposed to the Pilgrims. But in those 13 years, 20,000 people came to settle. And remember, we looked at the Pilgrims, and after about 70, 80 years, they only had 7,000 people in their settlement. So this is almost 3 times what they had after a much longer period that the Massachusetts colony had over the Pilgrims. By 1691, Massachusetts and Plymouth colonies combined, and they created one colony called Massachusetts. This chart, this compare and contrast chart, you will be having this, either you got it in class today. If you didn't, you can download it off my website, or you're going to get this tomorrow, and this gives you a heads up. But you will be comparing and contrasting. What was the reason Plymouth was founded? What was the reason Massachusetts was founded? And we're going to look at some of the similarities and differences in here. So be prepared with this for tomorrow. In our next video, we're going to look at, well, we looked at Jamestown, and we looked up the coast of North America, and we see Massachusetts and the Pilgrims. But what was happening with North Carolina? In the next video, we're going to begin to look at how North Carolina was established.